It's just a joke, Sophie, my father said, his laugh filling the dining room. Grandpa slid a folded check across the table toward me, smirking like it was part of some family game. Don't spend it all in one place, he added, and everyone burst into laughter. I stared at the paper for a moment before opening it. The numbers written on it were absurd, a ridiculous amount of zeros, the kind only meant to humiliate. For a second, no one spoke, waiting for my reaction. Then my brother leaned back, grinning. Guess you're rich now, sis. My mother pressed a napkin to her mouth, pretending to hide a smile. I forced a polite laugh. Good one, I said softly, though my voice caught halfway through. My face burned, and I could feel the back of my throat tighten. Come on, Sophie, Mom said, her tone dripping with that fake sweetness I'd grown up with. You've got to learn to laugh at yourself. I do, I murmured, folding the check carefully as if it were real, because admitting it hurt would only make them laugh harder. Grandpa chuckled again, shaking his head. You always were too serious for your own good. Dinner carried on like nothing had happened. They talked about my sister's new house and my brother's promotion, as if I were invisible. I sat there, nodding when expected, chewing food that felt like sand in my mouth. Every few minutes, someone would bring up something I'd done wrong years ago. The job I left, the ex I trusted, the nursing shift I missed when Mom was sick. I smiled through all of it. It's what I'd been trained to do since I was a child. Smile, endure, don't give them more to laugh about. When dessert came, Mom asked if I still lived in that little apartment near the hospital, like it was something to be embarrassed about. Yes, I said, keeping my tone even. It's close to work. That's nice, she said, glancing at my sister. At least she's trying. They both laughed under their breath. I pushed my chair back, pretending to stretch. Thanks for dinner, everyone, I said. My father waved without looking up, still laughing at something my brother whispered. By the time I stepped outside, the night air hit me like a slap. Cold, clean, silent. I didn't realize I'd been holding my breath until I reached my car. I sat there, hands on the wheel, staring at the check. The handwriting was neat. Grandpa's old-fashioned cursive, careful and deliberate. For a second, I almost laughed. Then something inside me twisted. It wasn't the first time they'd made me the punchline. Every birthday, every holiday, there was always some harmless joke about how I hadn't married, how I worked too hard, how I was too sensitive. They said it with smiles, but it chipped at me piece by piece. I ran my fingers over the paper. It's just a joke, I whispered, repeating my father's words. The kind of joke that left a bruise. I leaned back, closing my eyes. I should have been numb by now. But that night, something felt different. Maybe I was just tired. Maybe I'd finally started seeing them the way they really were, not as family, but as people who enjoyed watching me shrink. I thought about crumpling the check, tossing it into the glove box, and forgetting the whole thing. Instead, I smoothed it out again. The zeros almost glowed under the car light. It was ridiculous, but something about it made me hesitate. Maybe it was the precision of the handwriting, or the fact that Grandpa had actually taken the time to write it out, not just print it. He'd chosen to make it look real. Why? I sat there for a long time, the laughter from inside faintly echoing through the window. They were still at the table, probably moving on to another story that ended with my name. I turned the check over and saw something faint written near the edge. A mark. A small indentation like someone had pressed too hard with the pen. I couldn't read it, but it made my pulse quicken. A rational part of me said it meant nothing, but another part, the one that still hoped for something good beneath all the cruelty, couldn't quite let go. The night stretched quiet around me. My reflection in the car window looked unfamiliar, older than I remembered. I wasn't crying, not really, just sitting still enough for everything to hurt at once. Then I folded the check again, slower this time, and tucked it into my purse. I told myself I'd throw it away in the morning. I even believed it for a moment. But as I started the car and the headlights cut through the dark, that tiny flicker of doubt stayed alive somewhere behind my chest. Something about that check didn't feel finished. And for the first time in years, Neither did I. My name is Sophie Nate. I'm 32 years old, and I work as a nurse in a small hospital just outside Columbus, Ohio. It's not glamorous work, but it's honest. I rent a small one-bedroom apartment that smells faintly of coffee and disinfectant, and I drive the same car I bought used after college. Most days I leave before sunrise and come home after dark, too tired to cook anything more than soup. Still, it's mine. My space, my quiet. My brother Daniel is 34. He still lives 10 minutes from our parents and runs one of Dad's rental properties. Poorly, if you ask me. My sister Leah is 29 and somehow always between jobs. They both drive new cars, paid for by the same people who used to remind me that hard work builds character. I guess that lesson only applied to me. When I was younger, I used to think my father's coldness was just how men showed love. He never yelled, but silence from him could sting harder than words. Mom filled that silence with comparisons. "Leah's so good with people," she'd say, glancing at me across the dinner table. "And Daniel's just like his father, strong and decisive." Then she'd look at me, smiling like she didn't mean to hurt. "You're reliable." That was her word for me, reliable. The one who showed up even when no one else did. I didn't realize until much later that being the reliable one meant being taken for granted. When Daniel needed money to fix his car, Dad called me to transfer it because I was good with numbers. When Leah needed a last-minute babysitter for a friend's kid, I got the call because, "You don't have a family yet, sweetie." Every favor came wrapped in a compliment that felt like a slap. That fake check at dinner wasn't a new cruelty. It was just sharper than usual. They'd been making jokes about me for years. The poor nurse with a bleeding heart. The spinster daughter who still clips coupons. Grandpa's prank just gave them something physical to laugh at. And when I looked around that table, at the people I kept forgiving, I realized how easily they'd all joined in, even Grandpa. That night when I got home, I set the check on my kitchen counter and stared at it. It looked ridiculous under the yellow light. $10 million in my grandfather's careful handwriting. I almost laughed, but it caught in my throat. I thought about all the birthdays I'd spent working double shifts so I could buy them gifts. About the Christmas mornings where I showed up last because I was covering for someone else. And still, they saw me as the punchline. I sat down, elbows on the table, and tried to understand why this time it hurt more than usual. Maybe because I'd stopped expecting them to change. Maybe because I'd finally realized I didn't need to keep proving my worth. The humiliation didn't just sting. It settled somewhere deeper, in that quiet place where disappointment turns into decision. I picked up the check again, running my thumb over the ink. I could still hear Dad's laugh, that dismissive kind of laugh that said, "You'll never be one of us." I folded the paper once, neatly, and then again. I thought about tearing it up, but instead, I slipped it into my bag. I didn't know why. Maybe I just didn't want them to have the last word. Not this time. I know moments like that don't leave you easily. If you've ever sat quietly while someone mocked your effort, you'll understand what comes next. The next morning, the light came through the blinds soft and gray. I made coffee, the kind that tastes like burnt toast when you drink it too slowly. I should have thrown the check away right then. But as I reached for it, something in me hesitated. Maybe it was pride. Maybe it was something else. An instinct I couldn't name. I folded it again, tighter this time, and placed it carefully in my bag. It didn't feel like trash anymore. It felt like something waiting. I didn't know what for, but I knew this. Whatever was breaking inside me, it wasn't weakness. It was something else waking up. The laughter wouldn't leave my head. It followed me through every hallway of the hospital, echoing under the hum of machines and the shuffle of nurses' shoes. I tried to drown it out with work, focusing on vitals, charts, and medication rounds. My patients smiled at me the way families should, soft and genuine. Their small gestures, thank yous, gentle words, tired eyes that lit up when I entered should have eased the sting. But the sound of that dinner table stayed, sharp and mean, like a thorn pressed beneath my skin. By mid-morning, I felt the weight of no sleep. I took my coffee break in the staff lounge, a quiet room that always smelled faintly of bleach and burnt toast. I sat at the corner table, sipping from my chipped mug, the same one I'd used since nursing school. The check was folded neatly between the pages of my notebook. I didn't even realize it was sticking out until Maggie, one of the day shift nurses, pointed at it. "Looks fancy," she said with a grin. "You win the lottery or something?" I laughed softly. "Not quite. Just a family joke gone too far." She raised her brow. "Maybe it's real. You never know. People do weird things when they're old and sentimental." I smiled at that, even though my chest tightened. "If only." Maggie shrugged and went back to scrolling her phone, but her words sat with me long after she left the room. Maybe it was the way she said it, like it wasn't impossible. I looked down at the notebook. The edge of the check peeked out, smooth and deliberate. I pulled it free, feeling ridiculous for even humoring the thought. I unfolded it carefully. Under the fluorescent light, the ink looked darker than I remembered, the signature clean and unshaken. I tilted it toward the lamp. The routing number, the account number, even the watermark. They all looked too precise for a joke. My grandfather's handwriting was old-fashioned, yes, but always steady. He was the kind of man who paid bills early, who balanced checkbooks by hand. If this was his idea of humor, it was unusually detailed. I leaned back, staring at the ceiling, trying to make sense of it. Grandpa had always been complicated, warm when no one was watching, quiet when it mattered most. At family dinners, he laughed with the others, but sometimes I caught him studying me with that look of his. Not pity exactly, but something close to it, like he knew more than he could say. The memory of his face at that dinner came back sharp. The smirk, the half-amused eyes, the pause before he spoke. "Don't spend it all in one place." Maybe the joke wasn't what it seemed. Maybe he meant something else. I shook my head, trying to brush it off. "You're overthinking," I muttered under my breath. But the doubt had already settled. What if Maggie was right? The rest of the day blurred by in routine. Charts, rounds, discharge summaries. My body moved, but my mind stayed locked on that folded piece of paper in my bag. I caught myself glancing at it between patients, almost embarrassed by the pull it had. Logic said it was nothing, but instinct whispered otherwise. By the time my shift ended, the sun was sinking behind the hospital parking lot, painting the sky in tired shades of orange. I sat in my car, the check resting in my lap. For a long time, I just stared at it. The thought of walking into the bank tomorrow made my heart beat faster. Not out of greed, but out of something else entirely. Curiosity. Maybe even fear. It wasn't about the money. It was about what it might mean if it was real. If my grandfather had seen me all along, even when the others didn't. That night, I couldn't fall asleep. The apartment felt too quiet, every creak in the walls reminding me of something I didn't want to remember. When I finally drifted off, I dreamed of Grandpa sitting at that same dinner table, the check between us. His face was pale, unreadable. He slid it toward me again, but this time, he didn't smile. I almost turned around twice before stepping through the glass doors. The bank was small and quiet, the kind of place where everyone knew each other's business. My shoes clicked against the polished floor as I walked up to the counter, trying to look calm even though my heart was thudding so hard I could hear it in my ears. "Good morning," the teller said with a friendly smile. "How can I help you today?" I hesitated, feeling foolish already. "I just need to check something," I said. I slid the folded check across the counter. "It's probably nothing, a family joke, I think, but I just want to make sure." She took it, still smiling, and smoothed the edges flat with her fingers. Her eyes moved over the paper once, then again. The smile started to fade. "Give me just a second," she said quietly, almost under her breath. She turned and walked toward the back, the check still in her hand. I stood there, trying not to fidget. A man in line behind me coughed softly, impatient. I pretended to check my phone, but my hands were damp. Through the glass, I could see her speaking to another employee, an older man in a dark blue suit. He leaned over the check, frowned, and nodded. Then he looked up. At me. My stomach tightened. I wanted to say something, make a joke, explain that it wasn't serious, but the words wouldn't come. The teller disappeared behind the glass wall, leaving me alone at the counter. I could hear low voices, the sound of a printer, the shuffle of papers. Then silence. Finally, the man stepped out from a side door. "Ms. Nate?" he asked. His tone was polite but careful. "Yes," I said, my voice smaller than I expected. He gestured toward a desk in the corner. "Would you mind coming with me for a moment?" Every step felt heavier than the last. I followed him, trying to breathe normally. He sat across from me and placed the check gently on the desk between us. "I just need to verify a few details," he said. "Do you have identification?" I handed him my license. My fingers shook slightly, so I folded my hands in my lap. He looked at the ID, then back at the check. His expression didn't change, but something in his posture softened. "Ms. Nate," he said slowly, "this account is active. The check is valid." For a second, I thought I'd misheard him. "I'm sorry, what?" He turned the monitor slightly toward me. "The account belongs to your grandfather, Charles Nate. There's a substantial balance here. This check was written 3 days ago. It's not a joke." My breath caught. "You're saying this is real?" "Yes, ma'am." His voice was calm, steady. "It's real." I couldn't move. My mind tried to catch up, but everything felt distant, muffled, like I was underwater. I looked at the check again, at the same ink I'd stared at last night. The numbers, the signature, it all blurred together. I thought of Grandpa's half smile, the way his eyes lingered on me when no one else was watching. Half amusement, half pity. The manager studied me for a moment. "Would you like to deposit it?" I almost laughed. The sound came out more like a breath. "No," I said quietly. "Not yet." He nodded. "I understand." He slid the check back across the desk, folding my license on top. "For what it's worth," he said gently, "it looks deliberate. This isn't the kind of mistake people make by accident." Deliberate. The word landed heavy in my chest. I took the check with both hands, careful not to crease it. "Thank you," I said, though my voice barely reached him. Walking out of the bank felt like walking in a dream. The air outside was cold, too bright. Cars passed, people laughed, life went on. But everything in me was still. I sat in my car for a long time, the check lying on the passenger seat. Grandpa had written this for me, quietly, intentionally, and somehow everyone else had treated it like a joke. I stared at the signature again, at the care in every curve of his handwriting. He'd known what he was doing, and maybe, just maybe, he'd known what they'd do too. The teller's voice echoed faintly as I remembered her last words before I left. "You might want to talk to your grandfather," she'd said softly. "This looks deliberate." I held the steering wheel tighter than I should have, the check trembling on the seat beside me. My fingers kept brushing against it at red lights, as if I needed proof it was still there. The drive to my parents' house felt longer than usual, though I knew every turn by heart. The air was thick, heavy with questions I didn't know how to ask. When I pulled into the driveway, I could already see my father through the front window, sitting in his usual chair with the TV blaring. My mother opened the door before I even knocked. "Sophie," she said, eyes narrowing. "What's wrong? You look pale." "I need to talk to you," I said, stepping inside. "It's about the check Grandpa gave me." Her expression changed in an instant, half irritation, half amusement. "Oh, that," she said, waving a hand. "For heaven's sake, Sophie, it was just a joke. Don't embarrass yourself." "It wasn't a joke," I said quietly. I went to the bank. That got my father's attention. He turned down the TV, eyes sharp. "You did what?" "I had it checked. It's real." The teller and the manager confirmed it. My brother Daniel came down the hallway with a smirk. "You're kidding. You actually took that thing to a bank?" I looked at him, my voice steady. "I did. They said the account is active." My sister Leah laughed from the kitchen. "Oh, come on. Grandpa probably left a few dollars in it. Don't start thinking you've hit the jackpot. My mother crossed her arms. Sophie, you've always been dramatic. It was supposed to be funny. You're reading into it again. I'm not, I said. The manager told me the account has a large balance. He said it looked deliberate. The room went quiet for a beat. Then Daniel's voice cut through the air. You always think someone owes you. Maybe Grandpa was just being kind, not giving you a reason to go make a scene. I felt the sting of his words, but I didn't let it show. I didn't ask for anything, I said softly. I just wanted to understand. My father stood up. What's there to understand? He was joking. End of story. He signed it, I said, and the bank verified it. If you don't believe me, call them yourself. My mother's voice rose, the edge creeping in. That man is 92. He doesn't know what he's doing half the time. You should be ashamed, trying to make this into something it's not. I felt something inside me shift. Something quiet, but strong. I'd spent years shrinking to keep peace in this house, apologizing for things that weren't my fault. But this time, I didn't apologize. I'm not ashamed, I said. My voice came out calm, even, and it startled me. I'm just tired of being laughed at for taking things seriously. Daniel rolled his eyes. Here we go again. The nurse with the martyr complex. I looked at him and said, no. The daughter who finally stopped pretending she doesn't see what's in front of her. No one spoke. The silence felt thick enough to choke on. My mother turned away, muttering something about overreacting. My father sat back down, turning the volume on the TV higher, like that would drown me out. I picked up the check from the table and folded it neatly. You don't have to believe me, I said. But you will. Then I walked out. No shouting, no door slam. Just quiet steps that sounded louder than any words I could have said. By the time I reached my car, my hands weren't shaking anymore. The anger was gone, replaced by something steadier. It wasn't pride or defiance. It was clarity. I started to wonder, what would you do if your own family laughed while taking something that was yours? That night, I made tea and sat by the window, trying to let the day fade. My phone buzzed just as I was about to turn in. Unknown number. I hesitated before answering. Is this Sophie Nate? A woman's voice asked. I'm calling from your grandfather's care home. He's been asking for you. He says he needs to see you, soon. The cup slipped slightly in my hand, the sound of her voice cutting through the quiet. For a moment, I couldn't move. Grandpa never called for me, not once. I set the cup down and stared at the phone. Whatever this was, it wasn't over. When I walked into the retirement home, the smell of antiseptic and soft music hit me at once. The nurse led me down a quiet hallway to a sunlit room near the end. I stopped at the door and saw him. Grandpa, smaller than I remembered, thinner too, but his eyes were sharp and awake. He turned his head slowly and smiled. There she is, he said, his voice raspy but warm. I stepped closer, unsure what to say. You asked for me? He nodded, motioning for me to sit. I did. I wasn't sure you'd come after that dinner. I swallowed hard. I almost didn't. He chuckled softly, though it ended in a shallow cough. I don't blame you. That night wasn't what it looked like. I frowned, leaning forward. What do you mean? He reached for my hand, his skin thin as paper, his grip weak but steady. I wanted to see who laughed first, he said. That check wasn't a joke, Sophie. It was a test. I've watched your family for years, how they talk, how they treat people. I needed to know who still had some decency left. The words took a second to land. You meant it? He nodded slowly. Every zero, every line of it. I wrote that check knowing exactly what it would do. I wanted to see if anyone would show a bit of heart before the money came into play. I stared at him, my throat tight. They all laughed, I whispered. I know, he said quietly. I saw it. Even your father, especially your father. You didn't laugh, though. You sat there trying to protect what little dignity you had left, even as they mocked you. That's what I needed to see. I couldn't stop the tears then, though I tried to hide them by looking away. Why me, Grandpa? You've always treated everyone the same. He smiled faintly. No, I haven't. I've just pretended to. You remind me of your grandmother. Quiet strength, never needing an audience to prove you're kind. I wanted to make sure what I leave behind goes to someone who understands its weight. I felt a lump rise in my throat. You're talking about your will. Yes, he said. I'm changing it. I've already spoken to my attorney. The others won't like it, so I want you to handle things quietly when the time comes. Handle things? I asked. What does that mean? It means I trust you more than the rest of them combined. He paused to catch his breath. They've taken from me for years. Money, patience, respect. You're the only one who never asked for a thing. The nurse peeked in, checking the monitors before slipping out again. The room fell silent except for the sound of his breathing. I wanted to say something that made sense, but my mind was spinning. Grandpa, I don't know if I can. You can, he interrupted gently. And you will. You've spent your whole life being the one they underestimated. Let that work in your favor now. Don't tell them what's coming. Not yet. I wiped at my eyes, my voice trembling. I don't care about the money, He squeezed my hand again, his fingers trembling. That's exactly why I trust you with it. We sat there for a long time, the sunlight shifting slowly across the floor. I could see the effort it took for him to stay awake. His words had weight, and I could feel them pressing into me, shaping something I hadn't felt in years, validation. Not for what I had, but for who I was. He leaned back, eyes closing for a moment, and then he coughed, deep and violent, his whole body shaking. I reached for a tissue, but he waved me off weakly. I'm fine, he whispered, trying to steady himself. Please, I said, my voice breaking. You should rest. He opened his eyes again, and for a second they were clearer than before. Sophie, he said, barely above a whisper, don't trust your parents with this. Promise me. I froze, staring at him. What are you talking about? His lips parted as if to explain, but the cough came back, harsher this time. I pressed the call button for the nurse, panic rising, but he didn't look afraid. He just kept his eyes on mine, the faintest trace of peace in them. Promise me, he said again, the words shaking but certain. I promise, I whispered. The nurse rushed in, checking his pulse, adjusting his oxygen, but I could barely hear her. All I could think about were his last words echoing in my mind. Don't trust your parents with this. I sat there, holding his hand, feeling the weight of a truth I hadn't even uncovered yet. But somehow, deep down, I already knew he was right. 3 weeks later, Grandpa was gone. The call came early in the morning, quiet and matter of fact, the kind of tone people use when they've already told the story too many times. I sat on the edge of my bed, staring at the wall while the nurse spoke. He passed peacefully, she said, in his sleep. I thanked her, though I don't know why. The funeral was held 2 days later. My parents treated it like an obligation, not a loss. My mother chose flowers that matched the church curtains, and my father spent the morning reminding everyone where to park. My brother arrived late, wearing sunglasses he didn't take off once, and Leah complained about the weather, saying the sun was too bright for morning. I stood off to the side, hands folded, watching them talk and pose for pictures like it was some family reunion. When the pastor spoke about Grandpa's generous spirit, I felt a lump rise in my throat. He had been generous, but not in the way they wanted to remember him. They remembered his wallet. I remembered the way his hand trembled when he said, "Don't trust your parents with this." The words had not left my mind since that day. After the service, I lingered near the back pew, waiting until most people had left. That's when a man in a gray suit approached me. He introduced himself as Grandpa's lawyer. Ms. Nate, he said, holding a small sealed envelope and a silver key. Your grandfather asked me to give you this personally. The key is labeled Box 7C. He said you'd understand what to do with it. My mother saw him hand me the items. Her smile faltered, but she quickly turned to talk to a neighbor. My father's eyes followed the key until I slipped it into my purse. For a moment, I thought about asking the lawyer what was inside, but I already knew Grandpa would have wanted me to find out on my own. Outside, the air smelled faintly of wet grass and lilies. My siblings were laughing near the car, taking turns complaining about how long the service had been. Leah spotted me and said, "So, what did Grandpa's lawyer want? Don't tell me he left you another joke check." I met her eyes. "Something like that." Daniel smirked. "Don't get your hopes up. If there's money, Dad will handle it." I didn't respond. There was no point. The silence between us had become its own kind of language, one they couldn't hear, but I understood perfectly. When I got home that evening, I placed the envelope on my kitchen counter. The key sat beside it, small and unassuming. I thought about opening the envelope right then, but something in me said to wait. Grandpa had trusted me, not them, and I wanted to handle it the way he would have wanted, carefully, quietly. That night I went to work as usual. The hospital felt colder than usual, every beep and step echoing in the sterile air. During my break, I caught myself reaching into my bag to make sure the envelope was still there. It was. When I came home around midnight, the hallway outside my apartment was too quiet. The door wasn't fully closed. I froze for a moment before stepping inside. The air felt different, disturbed. My lamp was on, my drawers half open. The scent of cologne hung faintly in the air, the kind my father used to wear. I moved slowly from room to room. My jewelry box was untouched. The cash I kept in the kitchen drawer was still there. Nothing seemed missing. Then I looked at the counter. The envelope was gone. The key still sat where I had left it, alone. My stomach turned cold. I stood there in the stillness, the only sound my own breathing. Someone had been here, searching for something specific. They hadn't wanted valuables. They wanted answers. I looked at the key, the small 7C engraved into the metal. Whatever Grandpa had left me wasn't meant for anyone else's hands. I sat down, the room still and bright under the kitchen light, and whispered to myself, so this is what he meant. For hours, I sat on the couch staring at the space where the envelope had been. The key was still on the counter, shining under the dim kitchen light, but the rest, everything Grandpa had trusted me with, was gone. My hands wouldn't stop shaking. Every sound made me jump. Every shadow looked like guilt taking form. Whoever had come in hadn't wanted cash or jewelry. They wanted what was mine to protect. When the sun started coming up, I grabbed my coat and keys. I couldn't sit there anymore. My car felt cold, like the air itself was warning me to think before I moved. I opened the glove box to grab a napkin, but instead, I froze. Tucked beneath my old registration papers was a white envelope, sealed but familiar. My breath caught. I pulled it out, and there, written in Grandpa's shaky handwriting, were the words duplicate copy. I tore it open with trembling fingers. Inside was a bank document, formal and stamped. The language was dense, but the words that mattered were clear. Executor of estate, Sophie Nate, my name. My hands covered my mouth as I read the next line. This trust shall remain under the sole supervision of Ms. Nate, provided she protects it from family interference. Family interference. Grandpa had known. He'd seen it coming before I did. He hadn't just trusted me. He'd planned for this. My heart pounded so hard it hurt. Every memory of that dinner, of their laughter, came flooding back in fragments that suddenly made sense. He hadn't been testing them for fun. He'd been exposing them. I leaned back in the seat, clutching the document like it might disappear too. My phone buzzed on the console, startling me. Daniel's name flashed across the screen. I hesitated before answering. "Hey," I said quietly. "Hey, Soph," he replied, his tone too casual, too smooth. "How are you holding up? Been a rough week, huh?" "Yeah," I said. "It has." "I just wanted to check in," he continued. See how you're doing after the funeral and all." There was a pause, too long, too careful. Then he added, So, Grandpa didn't leave anything weird behind, did he? My throat tightened. What do you mean by weird? Oh, nothing, he said quickly, the fake concern cracking around the edges. It's just, Mom mentioned you got something from his lawyer, a letter or a key or something. She was worried you might get overwhelmed with all that paperwork. I could almost hear my pulse through the phone. Paperwork? I asked slowly. You mean the trust? There was silence, then a faint exhale, one he didn't mean for me to hear. So it's true, he muttered. I told them not to panic. My grip on the phone tightened. You told who? He tried to recover, his voice turning softer. Sophie, come on. Don't take it the wrong way. We just want to make sure everything's handled fairly. You can't do this alone. Dad said he'd help with the accounts. I don't need help, I cut in. And Grandpa didn't name you. That silence again. Heavy, thick, exposed. You checked? He finally asked, a hint of anger slipping through. Yes, I said. I did. Then you should have called us first, he snapped. You think you can just take charge because he felt sorry for you? The words hit their mark, but not the way he intended. The pity they'd always spoken of like it was a flaw. Grandpa had turned it into trust. Goodbye, Daniel, I said calmly, before hanging up. I sat there for a long time, the quiet pressing in around me. My reflection stared back from the windshield, pale and still. But there was something new behind my eyes, something I hadn't seen before. A line had been crossed, not by me, but by them. They thought they'd scared me into silence. They didn't know what I still had. The document in my hand wasn't just proof, it was power. Grandpa had left me more than money. He'd left me the truth and the chance to use it. I placed the paper back in the glove box and closed it gently. You wanted a game? I whispered, my voice steady now. Fine, I'll play. I started writing everything down, the calls, the messages, the sudden concern that came after years of silence. Every word was proof now. I didn't argue, didn't accuse. I just smiled when they spoke, polite and steady, while my hand quietly moved across the page. It was strange, how calm I'd become, like something inside me had switched from feeling to watching. My mother's voice on the phone had this thin sweetness to it, the kind people use when they're pretending to care. We're just worried, honey, she said. You've been distant. I'm fine, I answered softly. Just been busy. She hesitated. Well, your father thinks you might be overwhelmed. You can always bring the papers here. He'll take care of them. I smiled, even though she couldn't see it. I'm sure he would. When I hung up, I wrote down the time, her words, and what she didn't say. The silence between her sentences said more than anything else. At work, people noticed something had shifted. You're quiet today, a nurse said during rounds. I told her I was fine, and I was, in a way. My hands didn't shake anymore. My thoughts came sharper, clearer. Every breath felt deliberate. When Daniel texted that evening, I didn't ignore it. I opened it, read it twice, then answered with calm precision. Hope you're doing okay, he wrote. Mom's just worried about Grandpa's things being handled wrong. You know how legal stuff gets messy. I typed back. I'm following the instructions exactly as Grandpa left them. You don't need to worry. The typing dots appeared, then stopped, then started again. Just don't make this harder than it needs to be, he finally sent. I saved that message too. For days, I gathered everything. Dates, screenshots, missed calls, even the tone of their voices when they thought I didn't notice the strain behind their words. I wasn't collecting evidence out of anger, it was strategy. Grandpa had given me a task: protect the trust from family interference. And that's exactly what I was doing. The calm grew with every lie they tried to spin. My mother called one morning, all cheer. Your father was talking to an accountant friend. He said sometimes banks make mistakes with beneficiaries. Maybe you should double-check your paperwork before you get too comfortable. I let the pause stretch, long enough for her to hear the weight of my silence. That's good advice, I said. I'll make sure everything's accurate. Her tone flickered, uncertain now. You don't have to sound so cold, Sophie. I'm not cold, I said, just careful. After I hung up, I looked around my apartment. It felt different lately. Still mine, but heavier with secrets. Each folder, each printout, each note carried a piece of truth waiting for its turn. I wasn't afraid anymore. I was preparing. Sometimes, late at night, I thought about Grandpa's voice. Don't trust your parents with this. He'd known what was coming. I finally understood the kind of peace that comes when you stop hoping for fairness and start building your own. The next morning, I caught my reflection in the elevator mirror. I barely recognized myself. My coworkers smiled and joked, unaware of the quiet storm underneath. One of them said, "You've been so calm lately. What's your secret?" I smiled faintly. Patience. Inside, though, I knew what it really was. It was the calm of someone who'd stopped playing defense, the kind that comes right before a quiet war begins. Would you stay silent, or would you let them see what they truly built? That question stayed with me all day, echoing softly beneath everything I did. And then, just as I was locking up for the night, my phone rang. It was the lawyer. "Ms. Nate," he said, his voice uneasy. "Your parents came by today. They tried to access the trust early." The pen slipped from my hand. I stared at the wall, my pulse steady but slow. So it had begun. The conference room felt too quiet when I walked in. My parents were already seated, their expressions composed but tight, like they were trying not to show how long they'd been waiting. Daniel leaned back in his chair, scrolling on his phone, pretending he didn't care. Leah was fixing her lipstick in a compact mirror. The air smelled faintly of old paper and polished wood. The lawyer greeted me politely, then motioned for everyone to sit. My hands rested in my lap, still and folded. I could hear my heartbeat in the silence that followed. He cleared his throat. "Before we begin the formal reading, your grandfather left a personal message to be played for all of you." The screen flickered to life. Grandpa's face appeared, older, paler, but unmistakably him. He was sitting at his kitchen table, sunlight falling through the window behind him. His voice was calm, steady, the way it always was when he wanted to make a point. "If you're watching this," he began, "then I'm not around to explain things myself. But I think you all know why this meeting looks a little different." My mother shifted in her chair. My father leaned forward slightly, frowning. Grandpa continued, "Families are strange. We show love by habit, not by heart. We laugh at what hurts because it's easier than facing what's broken. But sometimes laughter tells the truth." He paused, then smiled faintly. "At that dinner, when I gave Sophie that check, I wasn't testing her. I was testing the rest of you." The room went still. Leah's hand froze midair. My father's jaw clenched. Grandpa's voice softened. "Sophie, you were the only one who looked at me, not at the paper. You didn't treat me like a burden or a joke. You listened. That kindness meant more than anything money could buy." He looked directly into the camera, and I felt the air leave my chest. "That check," he said, "was real. It was your rightful inheritance. I only made it look like a joke because I wanted to see who would laugh first." My mother's face drained of color. "What is this?" she whispered. The lawyer pressed pause, looked down at the folder before him, and began to read. "According to the most recent amendment of Mr. Nate's will, the full contents of his estate, financial accounts, property, and assets, are transferred into a trust managed solely by Ms. Sophie Nate. All other prior beneficiaries have been removed, citing moral misconduct and breach of familial duty." The sound that came from my father wasn't anger at first. It was disbelief. "You can't be serious." The lawyer adjusted his glasses. "It's signed, witnessed, and recorded. There is no ambiguity." Leah exhaled sharply. "He was manipulated," she said. "You must have done something." I met her eyes. "All I did was listen." My mother's voice cut through the air, trembling but sharp. "After everything we've done for him? After years of care?" I turned to her slowly. "You mean the years you stopped visiting unless it was for holidays or photo opportunities?" Her mouth opened, but no words came out. Grandpa's voice returned from the screen, quiet and unshaken. "If you're angry right now, It only proves my point. What's written is final. Sophie has my trust because she earned it. Not by blood, but by choice. My eyes burned, but I didn't blink. I wanted to hear every word. He leaned closer to the camera, his expression softening. Sophie, I'm proud of you. Don't let their laughter make you doubt yourself again. It took me a long time to see who was genuine, but you showed me before it was too late. The video flickered for a moment, then his final words filled the room, steady and clear. Sophie, never let laughter make you small again. The screen went black. No one moved. The lawyer closed his file quietly, the click of the clasp echoing in the silence. My parents stared at me like I'd taken something sacred, but all I felt was stillness, a calm so deep it almost frightened me. For the first time, their words didn't touch me. Their shock, their anger. It wasn't mine to carry anymore. Grandpa had already said everything I needed to hear. The room erupted before I could even stand. My mother slammed her hand on the table, her voice sharp and trembling. You think you fooled everyone, don't you? You manipulated him. You always had a way of twisting things. My father leaned forward, his face flushed. You played the victim for years, and now you're proud of yourself. You should be ashamed. I didn't move. I didn't even blink. The echo of their anger didn't reach me this time. I looked at the lawyer, then back at them, and said quietly, I didn't twist anything. Grandpa saw everything for what it was. Daniel laughed under his breath. Oh, please. You're acting like some saint now. He was old, confused. He was clear, I said, cutting him off before my voice could waver. He wrote it himself. The trust letter says, this inheritance belongs to the one who remembered kindness when the rest remembered laughter. Their faces shifted all at once, anger giving way to something closer to guilt, though they'd never admit it. I kept going before they could recover. He knew what he was doing. He knew who mocked him that night. He knew who never called. He didn't make a mistake. He made a choice. My mother stood up, her voice shaking. You don't talk to me like that. I'm your mother. I looked up at her. Then you should have remembered that before laughing at him in front of me. For a long moment, no one spoke. The room felt smaller somehow, tighter. I could hear the sound of the clock ticking behind the lawyer's desk. Every tick felt like a release, like something that had been locked inside me for years was finally letting go. My father's voice dropped low. You think this makes you better than us? No, I said softly. It makes me free. He opened his mouth to argue, but I was already gathering my bag. The lawyer watched silently, maybe understanding what this moment really was. Not a victory, just peace, long overdue. As I walked toward the door, Leah muttered, he would have regretted this. I turned slightly, meeting her eyes. No, he regretted trusting the wrong people for too long. I stepped outside into the cool evening air, and the quiet hit me like a wave. For the first time in years, my shoulders felt light. The tension I'd carried for decades, the need to please, to stay small, to not provoke, melted somewhere behind me, in that room full of voices that no longer had power. The sky was fading into pale blue and gray. I stood on the steps and took a long breath. The cold stung, but it felt clean, honest. I thought of Grandpa's voice from the video, steady and kind. Never let laughter make you small again. He'd known I needed to hear it now more than ever. The door behind me opened suddenly. My mother's voice followed me out, cold and sharp like the air. You'll regret this, Sophie. I turned halfway, my expression calm. Maybe, but at least it'll be my regret, not yours. I walked away without looking back, each step feeling quieter, surer. Their voices stayed behind, trapped in the same cycle they'd built for themselves. I was done repeating it. For the first time, silence didn't mean weakness. It meant freedom. It was a quiet Thursday morning when the phone rang. I almost didn't answer. I'd been avoiding unknown numbers for weeks, but something in me said to pick up. A woman's calm voice greeted me. Ms. Nate, this is Caroline from First Federal Bank. I'm calling regarding the account connected to your grandfather's trust. My breath caught. Yes? There's been a final transfer, she said. The balance has cleared into your name. It's substantial. I thanked her, but my voice didn't sound like mine. My hands trembled slightly as I sat down at the kitchen table. After everything, after all the noise and accusations, the silence of that moment felt unreal. When I opened my laptop and saw the amount, I stared at the screen for a long time. It wasn't just money. It was decades of his work, his patience, his quiet knowing. The number was larger than anything I'd ever imagined. But what made my throat tighten wasn't the balance. It was the small digital note attached beneath it. For Sophie, because she kept going. That's all it said at first. But the bank had also uploaded several scanned pages, letters, each one dated from a different year. I opened the first one and saw his handwriting, strong, careful, like it always was when he wanted his words to last. He wrote about the day I graduated nursing school, saying he'd watch from the back because he didn't want to make my parents uncomfortable. He said he saw how I smiled anyway, even when no one else from the family showed up. In another, he talked about the first apartment I rented, how proud he'd been that I managed it on my own salary. He'd written, "You never complained about being left out, even when it was clear you were." Tears blurred the words. I hadn't known he saw any of that. I thought I'd been invisible to everyone but the people who mocked me. The next letter was shorter. Every time they dismissed, you stood up straighter. Every time they laughed, you kept working. I wanted to make sure you knew I noticed. I pressed my hand to my mouth, trying to steady my breathing. The years of trying, of shrinking myself to fit, all came flooding back. But this time it didn't feel like pain. It felt like someone finally saw the truth I'd been carrying alone. I sat there for hours, reading and rereading his words, hearing his voice between the lines. The noise of the world faded, until all that was left was his steady tone in my mind. Firm, warm, unbroken. At the end of the last page, there was a single line written in darker ink, as if he'd pressed harder into the paper. Use it to build the life they told you you didn't deserve. I read it again and again. It wasn't just instruction, it was permission. For years, I'd lived inside their version of who I was. Too sensitive, too independent, too serious. But Grandpa had seen the truth. He'd turned every cruel laugh, every ignored moment, into something stronger, something lasting. I folded the letters neatly, the way he would have, and placed them back in the envelope. The money didn't matter as much as those words. What mattered was that even after he was gone, he found a way to lift me out of the shadow they'd built. As I sat in the fading afternoon light, I whispered softly, "I will," because I knew exactly what he meant. The care home smelled like fresh linen and faint lavender when I walked in. It was the same place Grandpa had spent his last months, and for a long time, I couldn't bring myself to visit again. But now, standing at the reception desk with the donation form in my hand, I felt something shift inside me. The manager looked up, surprised. "Ms. Nate, you didn't have to come in person. We got your letter." "I wanted to," I said quietly. "He was treated kindly here. I just wanted to say thank you." She nodded, eyes softening. "He spoke about you all the time, said you were his calm." Those words sat in the air like a weight and a comfort all at once. I handed her the envelope and watched as she placed it carefully in a drawer, like it was something sacred. Walking out, the sunlight hit my face. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like I was walking away from something. I was walking toward peace. I moved into my new house a few weeks later. It wasn't big or fancy. A small 2-bedroom place with chipped paint on the porch and a quiet backyard. But there was a garden, wild and stubborn, with marigolds that refused to stop blooming. It felt like a place meant for healing, not for show. Every morning before work, I sat by the kitchen window with my coffee, watching the light slide across the table. There were no raised voices, No silent judgment. No pretending. Just me. Just stillness. I went back to nursing, but on my own terms this time, part-time, at a small community clinic where faces were familiar and kindness came easy. The work was slower, gentler. No one tried to talk over me. No one made me feel small. Sometimes when I left the clinic late in the evening, I'd think of Grandpa's letters. His words lived somewhere between my heart and my breath. Use it to build the life they told you didn't deserve. I smiled every time I remembered it. That line had built this new version of me. One Sunday afternoon, I was planting herbs near the back fence when Mrs. Delaney, my neighbor, leaned over from her side. "You've got a green thumb," she said, laughing softly. "Maybe," I replied, "or maybe the plants just know I finally stopped rushing them." We talked for a while about small things, tomatoes, the weather, the best time to water. It was ordinary, simple, but it felt real. I didn't realize how much I'd missed that kind of peace until I had it again. Inside, my house smelled faintly of mint and coffee. The floor creaked in a way that felt alive. Every little imperfection reminded me this was mine, not given, not borrowed, not judged. At night, I often sat on the porch with a blanket and a cup of tea, looking at the stars. The quiet didn't scare me anymore. It used to feel like loneliness. Now it felt like freedom. I thought about how strange it was, the way peace sneaks up on you, not in a grand moment, but in the small ones. A warm light through the curtain, a letter tucked in a drawer, the sound of your own voice not trembling anymore. My phone buzzed beside me. I almost ignored it, lost in the rhythm of the evening. But when I glanced down, my heart gave a small, reluctant stir. It was a message from Daniel, just one line. "We need to talk." I stared at the words for a long moment. The night air felt still around me, waiting. After everything that had been said, after everything that had finally gone quiet, his message sat there like a knock on a door I wasn't sure I wanted to open again. I locked the screen slowly and placed the phone face down beside me. The stars didn't move, the garden didn't whisper, just silence, and a question I wasn't ready to answer yet. When I opened the door, Daniel stood there, hands in his pockets, shoulders slumped like the air had gone out of him. "Hey," he said quietly, almost like a stranger. "Hi," I replied, stepping aside. "Come in." He looked around the house as if trying to recognize the person who'd built it. "Nice place," he said. His voice carried that careful politeness people use when they need something. I smiled faintly. "It's peaceful." We sat at the kitchen table. The air between us was soft, still, and cautious. He cleared his throat. "Mom and Dad, they're not doing great. The house might go soon. Medical bills, taxes, everything's piling up." I listened without interrupting. I could feel the old ache stirring, the familiar pull to fix what I didn't break. But it didn't reach me this time. He leaned forward. "They wanted me to ask if you could maybe help out a bit, just until things settle." I looked at him, steady and calm. "You mean after they told me I was manipulative, after they tried to take what wasn't theirs?" His eyes dropped. "They didn't mean it like that. They were angry." "I know," I said softly. "They always were." He let out a slow breath. "They're scared now. You know how they are with money." "I do," I said. "That's why I'm not giving them any." He looked up, a flicker of surprise crossing his face. "You're serious?" "Yes. I'm not angry, Daniel. I just finally understand that love doesn't mean rescuing people from the results of their own choices." He rubbed the back of his neck, his voice low. "I didn't come here to fight. I just thought maybe you'd want to know." "I'm glad you told me," I said. "And I can help you find something better. You're still good with numbers, right? I have a friend who manages hiring at the clinic. She mentioned needing someone steady with bookkeeping. I can connect you to." He blinked, caught between relief and shame. "That's more than I expected." "It's what I can do," I said. "Not what they want me to." He looked around again, eyes catching on the garden outside the window. "You really built a life here, didn't you?" I nodded. I did, bit by bit. No one gave it to me, so it feels different, solid. He gave a quiet laugh, the kind that hides something heavy. I always thought you'd come running back to them. So did they, I said. But I stopped running the day I realized I wasn't the one who left. He stared at me for a long moment. You sound like him, he said finally. Grandpa? He nodded. Yeah, the way you talk now. Calm, sure. I smiled a little. He taught me that peace isn't something people give you. You have to keep it for yourself. He looked down, his voice small. I guess I forgot how to do that. You'll remember, I said. Start with work. Build something you can stand on. He stood, awkward but grateful. Thanks, Sophie. Really. You're welcome, I said, walking him to the door. This is how it should have been. You asking, me helping, but not losing myself to do it. He nodded slowly. Yeah, I get that now. When the door closed behind him, I stood for a while, listening to the quiet. It wasn't cold or empty this time. It was clean. I walked to my desk, the one by the window where the light falls in the morning. On it sat a small frame I'd been meaning to fill. I opened the drawer and pulled out the old check. Grandpa's handwriting still steady, his signature still bold. I slid it into the frame and set it upright. It didn't represent money anymore. It was proof. Proof that he saw me, that I made it through. I traced the edge of the glass with my finger and whispered, I kept my promise. The garden outside swayed gently, in the wind, and for the first time in years, I felt completely still. The morning light spilled across my desk like a slow breath, warm and steady. Outside, the garden shimmered under the soft gold of early spring. I sat by the window, the same place where I'd watched so many endings become beginnings, and unfolded the last of Grandpa's letters. The paper had worn soft at the edges, his handwriting still neat and calm, every stroke deliberate. He wrote about dignity, not the loud kind people demand, but the quiet kind that stays when the noise fades. He said restraint was its own strength, that peace wasn't silence from others, but silence from within. There's more power, he wrote, in walking away with your voice unshaken than in shouting to be heard. I read that line 3 times. My tea had gone cold, but I didn't mind. His words didn't need warmth to carry weight. I thought back to every moment I'd wanted to prove myself, to respond, to fight, to make them see what they threw away. But the truth was simpler. I didn't need to win an argument. I only needed to keep living the life they said I couldn't. In the distance, I could hear faint laughter from the old neighborhood. It carried through the air like a memory trying to test me, to see if it could still reach the part of me that once broke under it. I listened. It didn't hurt anymore. It just sounded ordinary. For a long time, I used to think revenge meant payback, that someday they'd look at me and regret everything. But now I understood what Grandpa meant when he said revenge was never about wealth or power. It was about respect, earned quietly, without the need for an audience. The check sat framed on my desk, beside the last letter. The ink had faded slightly, but the signature still stood bold. People might have seen it as a symbol of victory, but to me, it was just proof of survival, of the night they laughed, and how I finally didn't shrink beneath it. I took a slow sip of fresh tea, the steam curling upward into the light. Peace wasn't loud, I realized. It didn't come with applause or closure speeches. It arrived quietly, on an ordinary morning, when you finally stopped waiting for someone else's approval to feel whole. I leaned back, watching sunlight play across the glass frame, and let the quiet fill the room. For years, I'd carried the echo of their voices in my head, every doubt, every dismissal. Now, all I could hear was the steady rhythm of my own breath. I traced a finger over Grandpa's handwriting again. You don't owe them anger, he'd written. You owe yourself peace. That was what he wanted for me. Not revenge, not validation, just stillness. The garden outside looked alive again. The marigolds had bloomed brighter than before, almost defiant in their color. I smiled, realizing they'd grown exactly the way I had, without needing anyone's permission. If you've ever waited for life to prove your worth, instead of shouting it, you understand what peace feels like. Thank you for listening, and if this story touched you, stay with us for more like it. I looked at the check one last time, its frame catching the light. I kept it not for its value, but for the day they laughed, and I didn't.